featuring speakers from CapitaLand, Smart Spaces, and Kony. So we've got Elwin Tan with us, the Chief Customer Solutions Officer.
Yeah.
So Elwin, he actually is, he's got a very diverse portfolio. He is responsible for formulating and executing industry formation and development, marketing and key customer engagement strategies for CapitaLand Group. He's also the chairman of AirMaker, a co-innovation platform focusing on startups in the space of IoT, Internet of Things, and also the director of Smart Urban Co-Innovation Lab. So Elwin, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate having you here.
Yeah.
And then the next one, we have Dinesh Malkani. So Dinesh Malkani, he is the CEO and founder of Smart. He's an industry veteran with over 26 years of experience, has held key leadership roles in companies like AT&T, Lucent, Avaya, Jabra, Cisco. He was previously the president of Cisco India and from 2014 to 2017. And prior to this, he was also the managing director for collaboration with Cisco and was the country president of Avaya in Korea and China for a period of 12 years. So pretty reputable portfolio as well. Dinesh, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome on board.
Thanks, Nat. Hi, everybody.
And then a very important person as well. We've got Yuka Salmikuka. Sorry if I pronounced it wrongly, just correct me. He is the Director of Strategic Partnerships from Kony. He's got a 15+ year career in Kony, including various positions in global business development, R&D, and new services development. The past few years, he has been focusing into establishing and building Kony partner ecosystems with various types of smart building solution providers, mainly in Europe and Asia. Thank you so much, Yuka, for joining us as well.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, so without further ado, I just wanted to run through the agenda and basically what we would be speaking about. So technological innovation is very important. It's starting to be at the forefront to ensure a smooth return for tenants back to workspaces. But I think the key question that everyone keeps asking about is what constitutes an effective plan for tenants to return back. So some of the key pointers we'll be running through, which would be asked towards the panelists as well, would be how can the tenant experience be strengthened through technological innovation? What are the best practices to manage tenants and visitors in a safe, touchless, and compliant process? And how exactly can we leverage on technology, which is, maybe even considering things like artificial intelligence to monitor social distancing and facilitate contact tracing? How could we also strengthen communication and keep tenants updated about SOPs and FAQs? Because there needs to be a platform as well for, strong, effective communication. And granted all these things mentioned, how much time would it actually require to implement such technologies? So this would roughly be, the main topic of conversation that we'll be talking about, mainly an effective, safe, smooth return. We would start off with a panel discussion featuring the three of the panelists. So CapitaLand would mainly be touching on things such as the wider industry. He will be speaking about how exactly, what are the key findings in the real estate industry, what the commercial real estate industry is looking for, why is technological innovation important. Smart Spaces would be touching on, very technological driven aspects. So the need and demand for the solution, for technological innovation and solution, and also some key findings on key deployments launched. While Kony will be talking about the need for technological solution, more on the contactless processes, building entry systems, and why modernization in the building is important. So I wanted to kind of run through the premise and the questions. But before that, I also want to take you guys through the housekeeping rules. So the panel discussion will take roughly 35 minutes, and the last 15 minutes we'll keep it for some questions from the audience. So if you guys see on the Zoom link, there's actually a Q&A section or a chat. So feel free to drop in your questions whenever you guys ask. So this would be kept at the last 15 minutes. So I would start off, and basically I'm going to direct my first question, which is roughly on the pandemic and the challenges in the times today. So we understand that, the pandemic has caused a lot of different industries to be impacted. It's caused a lot of changes. But I'm interested in finding out, a little bit more about the commercial real estate industry. How exactly has this impacted the commercial real estate industry? And my first question would be to Elwin. Can you share some key findings or even some challenges you can, provide on how exactly this industry has been changed or impacted? Elwin, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nat. Hi, everyone. First of all, let me thanks to the organizers, Matan Spaces, Dinesh and Yuka, for inviting me to this platform to have a discussion with all of you. On coming back to the questions that was posed, I think in CapitaLand we operate quite a wide variety of spaces, from commercial, and even within commercial, you will look at the difference in terms of CBD offices to business parks. So those are also office space, but different users, different activities, and so on. By and large, we think that in consultation with many of our customers, post-COVID, how will space be used and how will office change? The verdict is still out there, right? People have gotten used to working from home, but a lot of people also realize that working from home, while it is acceptable, but it may not be great for building strong cultures in the companies. Secondly, also very important is that going forward, a lot of growth requires to bring people together to co-innovate and partner each other and so on. And it's going to be challenging if you are working in silos at homes and so on. And the third areas concerns new hires to the companies. If they don't come to the office and get to know their colleagues and so on, it's going to be a nightmare for them to see how they can even integrate into the company. So I think that the world out there post-COVID is still a big question mark, but we do think that the way companies use space will be different. They may not need as much space as before, but at the same time, we do believe that office space, commercial space will not go away because of at least these three factors that I just mentioned just now.
Those are great pointers, Elwin.
Yeah.
It's very good that you're sharing how exactly your thoughts on the office space landscape. I'd like to also kind of find out from Dinesh, from your experience, based on the pandemic, the current times, what are your thoughts on the kind of solutions that building owners are looking for? And also, would you want to touch on something Elwin had just said, which is his thoughts on the office space? Do you think it will still be here, and how exactly will it change? Will it be more on a different landscape?
Sure, Nat, thanks. So thank you, Alvin. Thank you, Yuka. And thanks, everybody, for joining in, right? I think one thing is clear, right? That this pandemic has driven extreme innovation. If you think about it, product cycles that used to take years have been shrunk down to months. And it's phenomenal. And I give a lot of credit to the engineering community, right? That kind of came together and said, okay, these are problems. And step by step, how are we going to try and play our part in being able to resolve it? And the building industry is no different, right? If you think about it, like today you go into, I'm in Singapore, right? And if Alvin, I'm in one of your properties, right? Offices here. And, right from the time I come in, there's automated temperature taking, and you scan a QR code and then you come in, and then obviously, so these were innovations that came out literally weeks into basically when the pandemic started. Now, that was at the beginning, right? So safety, security, pre-screening, entry was the first priority that was being put into place. And now, actually, if I think about it, right, we are doing deployments in almost 30 major cities around the world. And it's the same thing. How do I solve the entry process, because people coming in should know that everybody's equal, everybody has been checked, everybody's been screened, there's enough data available for contact tracing, and that piece was the first thing that was created, and it was highly technology driven. I would say almost all of it, right? Of course, then you had the processes and the SOPs and things like that that were related to the entry piece. The second innovation that really came out was in the sense of contactless, because of course, if an employee is coming back to work, right, and I always believe whether it's one person or it's 50 people or it's 10,000 people, it's a no stones unturned approach that you have to take. And today, no doubt, even if you get food delivery, there's an option of, you want it contactless, somebody leaves it outside your house. Now, you're coming to work because you're in an essential services business, or you need to come to work, and so you have to be taken care of. So then came the innovation in the contactless services. You come, even if it's a visitor, sorry, I don't want to fill up too many forms and things like that, everything has to be contactless. Your access into the building, completely contactless. Thank you, Yuka. All the elevators, right? Well, you should be able to select your floor, and you should be able to get in, and it should take you. You walk in, the door opens, totally contactless. You look for your desk, contactless. So I think that was the second phase of innovation, and it's amazing to see how that has started coming together. And then there's a third phase of innovation, which I think is directly related to what Alvin mentioned. It's around work style. It's very interesting, right? Yesterday, or actually last week, big bank said, hey, we're coming back. And then another bank said, we're also coming back. So there will be all these conversations and debates. But one thing is for sure, work from home is here to stay. However, it's not going to be in the form of, hey, all of us are going to be working from home. I don't think that is the, there was a lot of talk about it. I think 6 months in, everybody feels that there's going to be a hybrid model. A hybrid model is probably, from our point of view, a much more realistic, doable model, but that also requires technology innovation, distribution of teams, how is space going to be managed, the flexibility, the measurement of occupancy, the air quality that is related to the occupancy. So that's the next wave of innovation that is sort of coming in. But if I'm a building owner, or if I'm a real estate company, I need to be, and if I want to bring people back to work, or if I want to encourage my tenants to come back to work, or if I'm thinking of what the next wave is going to be, then I need to start drawing up that digital blueprint, right? And I must say that that majority, at least from our lens, majority of the real estate companies are starting to go down that path. Some are still on the entry side, some are on the entry plus the whole contactless and other innovations. And then some have even progressed and said, hey, flexible working is a reality. How are we gearing up for our tenants to be able to do that? And trust me when I say that the speed of innovation has been moving extremely quickly, right? So good time to jump in there, start rethinking on the future, and then deploy some of those solutions back in your buildings.
Thank you, Dinesh. That was a very detailed explanation into it. Pretty great insights. Yuka, Dinesh spoke about a few things. He also spoke about, the need for innovation, and he brought up things like, contactless in regards to building entry systems and all that. I just wanted to find out your thoughts on how exactly do you think the pandemic has impacted the industry, and your thoughts on the contactless processes and the need and importance for these processes.
Okay, very good. I must say that it's based on what Alvin and Dinesh already shared. It's really challenging to come up with something new, because a lot of good thoughts, and I'm fully agreeing on those. But maybe way I see this is that, of course, what we see as a demand, everybody wants to get people back to office safely, and that's of course driving now the demand and in short term. But there, of course, like the technology is one thing, and like Dinesh mentioned, great innovations has been happening in very short time frame. But what I see being important is that we would look the big picture, and like rethinking how the office and processes in there are to be done. a lot of governments are in very different positions regarding the COVID and putting very different regulations and restrictions. So naturally, that also has a big impact on how on individual country level you should respond and what kind of solutions you would need to put in place. And as the situation is not stable, I think the flexibility to adapt with the new normal is really the key, and that makes it even more important to come up with such a technical innovations and solutions that can be applied into this kind of conditions where you might have changing policies and changing situations quite rapidly. And a little bit continuing on what Dinesh was saying, I think if trying to find something positive out of this COVID, it for sure has been accelerating the digital transformation in real estate industry and in buildings and the way we work. So I think that's a very good thing, and also agreeing very much with Alvin that offices will be there also in the future, but there needs to be rethinking of the role of offices and how they are used, and to build more also this kind of future proofness and adaptivity into the spaces that it is easier to respond to the changing conditions and changing needs.
Thank you, Yuka. You brought up some points about, say, compliance and how this would change according to different regulations, different countries that we're in. Singapore, for instance, you have a few guidelines that you have to stay relevant and stay compliant with, especially in the workplace. And it also is very important that we have a process mapped out, just so that the tenants are reassured the building is safe to return to. And also, I think, Dinesh, it would be great to hear your thoughts on, how exactly the journey of the tenant is when they return back to the building. Maybe you could share a little bit more on the steps in your experience, and also based on the best practices on how exactly, the technological process is like, how exactly the mapping of the journey of the tenant is like back to the building.
Okay. So I'll give you maybe I'll give you a very quick perspective, right? So we have worked with many sort of building landlords, right? So first is you think about all the tenants that you have, you apply, the first rule, which is what is set by the government. What is the occupancy? What's the max occupancy that we can have in our building? Let's say it's 33%. The first thing you do is you use technology to make sure that you never exceed that number. So you count the number of people that are coming in and you do it using technology. That's the first thing that I think we have worked with so many developers to be able to deploy. The second thing is that you think about health declarations, right? In Singapore, there's safe entry. So safe entry is good, easy, and so obviously we integrated it back into our system. But if you look in other countries, I know we've got participants from ASEAN or India, we have built that capability of safe entry where you kind of, get a sense of doing health declarations before employees come in. Because, if they're coming from zones that are identified as red zones, as an example, or if the person has traveled over the last 14 days, or standard questions that you need to ask them so that that everybody coming into the building, it's a multi-tenanted building, right? Everybody coming into the workplace has been pre-screened. That's the second important part. The third important part is contactless services, right? So obviously we work with Pune, where today you don't need to touch the access points or the doors and other things, right? Everything in the building can move in a very contactless manner, including the elevators, right? So you select the floor you're on, you just specify the destination you want to go to, you get, it kind of tells you, oh, lift number, 2A is going to take you to your office. You get in there and you're on the 16th floor, you go up there. So we mapped out the journey of, and for example, simple things, well, I was down and there was no sort of sanitizer, right? And the sanitizer was empty, but being able to report those kind of problems, knowing what are the standard operating procedures in the building, what are the precautions being taken, being able to really feel safe in that building. But these are the things that are being used by the building owners in the first instance to get their buildings ready. Compliance, employee safety, reporting, helplines. So, right from us, you should be able to click on a button and get connected to a helpline, right? Once you take care of these things, I would say that's the most basic thing that you can do from a technology point of view to get yourself ready to bring people back to work. That has been our experience so far. And like I said, the second part of the journey will be about flexible working, but we'll come to that a little later. So
those are really good pointers, Dinesh. Thanks for actually, mapping it out for us and stating how exactly the tenant's return can be a seamless process. Yuka, I'll then direct this to you. Dinesh mentioned a few things about contactless elevators and this entry process. So it's very important to have safety and control for the tenants to return. Could you maybe elaborate on some best practices on how safe and contactless processes could be implemented? Share a little bit more about building entry systems on your side.
Yeah, for sure. If looking like the technical elements and like needs that we have been seeing raising now thanks to COVID, much like Dinesh already mentioned, the touchless access is of course one of the key things, because especially like elevators, buildings live and breathe with elevators, and if you are not able to use the devices, pretty much the building is like paralyzed. So obviously ensuring the safe people flow in the buildings is very much in our domain, and we have been building up capabilities to ensure that. And what we see there is that, of course, we can provide certain solutions. Some other building system providers might provide other solutions, but it's a big risk that those solutions can be seen as just a point solution addressing one thing there in the puzzle. But you really need to have this kind of more comprehensive look of the big picture and how the building is operating, how the tenants are using the building, how you move there, where you might have the congestion in the buildings, and what kind of things you can do besides the technology. Can you do something else there to make the flow of people smoother, to enable social distancing and things like that? And technology is then one enabler there. We have been working with this touchless access, touchless UI related things. Then clean air is one interesting and important area, and then this data and information sharing, because of course situation in the building might change very rapidly. You have an infection found in one floor. How do you inform the tenants about the changing situation? So that is also important, and also to create this kind of feeling of safety for the tenants. And there is a lot of technical capabilities to do these kind of things, but if they are separate from each other, I feel that it's not the optimal way of doing this, and that's also one reason why we are, for example, collaborating with Smart Spaces, so that we can build together this kind of more comprehensive solutions that are easy to manage and deploy, and to give this kind of more comprehensive control over the situation also for the building operators. And to make that happening, each building, when you look at they are more or less unique. You have a unique location, different type of physical setup, different set of tenants. You might have different security processes. So you should look the big picture of each building separately. And we have actually on Kone's side, we have our people flow consulting team globally touching these kind of things, collecting the sensor data, combining that with analytics and expertise from architectures and other disciplines to really build this kind of complete view, and based on that kind of insight, then you can really select the optimal way of leveraging the technology, maybe changing some of your processes, for example, how you deal with the visitors and things like that.
Thank you, Yuka. Very comprehensive. Yuka, you touched on several stuff. You said that it's important for a very comprehensive view. You brought in things like air quality, the importance of safety in the building and all that. I would like to hear also from Elwin. They've mentioned a lot of things about technological innovation. They've mentioned about the importance of modernization in the building, and also the need for a comprehensive view on certain processes, on a lot of processes actually. What are your thoughts on how this demand has risen? Do you think tenants are looking for innovation and solutions like this right now? Is that the need of the hour? Do you think building owners are actually more in tune, and the pandemic has basically accelerated the need for such innovations? Because Dinesh and Yuka shared all these things about basically the importance, but I also like to hear on your side, on the demand side, do you think that has risen?
I think definitely, and let me. I mean, I agree a lot with what Dinesh and Yuka has shared. But let me build on that as well. The way we look at adoption of technology and so on is that we believe that to overcome this pandemic and also to emerge in the post-pandemic world, technology will play a definite role, but it requires all of us to collaborate, change our habits. So the partnership is very, very critical. Technology at this point in time will play a complementary role to help us move towards a certain habits and so on, but it can never replace the kind of things that we need in totality in order to make it safe. In short, what I'm trying to say is that we cannot say that just because technology is there, it will be totally safe for us to go back to work and so on. It will never happen. I think it requires us to have a certain change in habits and so on. So for us, other than technology, we are also interested in how do we make it convenient for our tenants, our customers, as well as how do we make it sustainable for our frontline staff to deliver these services. That's why I think for those of you who are in Kaplan's property, we are probably one of the fastest to put up all the infrared scanners, when the temperature screening start to kick in, because we do not want to inconvenience our frontline staff having to poke a thermometer, at the forehead or whatever, and really create queues, traffic jams, for human traffic jams going to the building. So I think that's something that we took action very quickly. Now, what we are doing is that the good thing is that because we also operate hotels, service apartments, and so on, we are now looking at cross-pollinating ideas that we use to clean the lodging units, to see how do we adapt it to the offices and so on. So they are looking at different technologies, from UV robots. Now some companies are putting to us ionized air, devices, that has some countries like Japan has said that it is effective to inactivate the virus and so on. So we are now testing it. The question is, how do you know that it is so? We are asking the companies, please give us a counter so that we also know how much negative ions is floating in the air, because just having the equipment turned on doesn't mean that there's a negative ions in the air, right? We are testing many of these things, and like what Yuka said, we also do not want to do this in isolation, because to be safe, there's always a weak link, and the weak link is the one that breaks the thing. So whenever we have interesting ideas or come across interesting technologies, we tend to also get our partners, like Kone and so on, to also evaluate together with us to see whether it does make sense or not. Because we want to make sure that entire systems end to end is as robust as possible. So in short, we look at the human element, we look at it from a system perspective, we look at cross-pollinating ideas, and there are many ideas that comes along. And interesting, later, if we have some time, I'll just walk you through, using this video through a lab that we are putting together. Next week will be the first week that we will open the doors to have more external guests. It is also a small hobby of ours put together to allow technology companies to come and test bed their ideas, show to us how effective it is, so that we don't disrupt the offices, by putting experimental technologies into real world applications immediately, and then find out it doesn't work and then inconvenience all our people. So we are very oriented towards how to make it convenient, how to make it robust as a systems, how to make it sustainable, not just for our customers, but also for the people, our frontline staff delivering the experience and the services to our customers. And technology to us will become an enabler, will become a complementary technologies to help us to reach that goal of ours.
Thank you, Alvin. That a lot of insights on the convenience, the ease, and also how we should ensure safety and compliance. So these are the pointers you brought up, such as using thermal scanners and everything to make sure that the frontliners are also having an easy time. So, Mitch, I would like to kind of direct this to you based on what Alvin touched on. It's very important for things like the safety of tenants and also when they return back to the building. I would love to hear a little bit more on how we can use technology for things such as contact tracing, for things such as health declaration. How exactly does it work, and how is the process like? How is artificial intelligence being brought into the picture, and how exactly can this provide convenience, compliance, and also safety for the tenants?
Okay, so I think firstly, Alvin, thanks. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, technology is an enabler, but it's a key enabler, right? Because so whenever we build technology, right, we always think, you have to do that acid test, right? We have to walk yourself through a building and see that, hey, would I actually use this, right? Is this something which I find easy to use, or is it going to be a nightmare? Like nobody wants to do that, particularly at a time like this. One of the things that we're very conscious of is everybody's wearing masks. And then I have specs, and then now I have these AirPods, and still, I have to take out an app. And so I had a problem getting into one of the places because it said you have to do facial recognition, right? And so I have my specs on, I have my mask on, and I have a cup of coffee, and I'm trying to struggle with the app opening. So I think those things have to be well thought through, right? I think I completely agree with your point, right? It is definitely a collaboration, but the user also has to collaborate. But user will only collaborate when it's made easy for them.
That's
right? And I want to share another thing with you. Is that one realization we had was at times like this, and in many countries where there are a lot of cases, it's very hard to call up an employee and say, oh, by the way, you need to go on site and you need to be there for the next 2 weeks deploying all this hardware and sensors and everything else. And so we had to also think of very innovative ways so that deployment can be quick, because companies were like, we want this quickly, even now, like everybody wants it tomorrow, right? So you have to think of ways that can be deployed very quickly, and B, it can be done in a manner that you don't have to have big teams, that kind of go in there. So try and think of cloud, and try and think of SaaS models, and try and think of, and I think you raised a very important point, right? If the ecosystem is not open, then you lose the benefit of being able to provide that seamless sort of solution, right? But I mean, fair enough. I think the industry responded pretty well in being able to open up their systems so that, Ned, you mentioned about thermal sensors. And so how do you automate the process of getting the temperature, and when the person is coming in, when they actually put their phone on the access, if they just walk through the temperature and they've not done their health declaration and the temperature was higher then the access door will not open. It'll probably give them a message saying, you know, please contact the admin, or if the occupancy has gone higher. So the connecting of these dots and the linking up of it is going to define how easy is your solution for the user. It's also going to define how easy is it to deploy it. See, nobody has time to do 6-month projects, right?
Yep.
These are short, got to go in there, bring the ecosystem together, you know, and get started. 2-3 weeks, hand over everything to the customer. Tenants are ready to roll, and you kind of bring them back.
Yeah.
That's the new way. That's really the new normal. And I think the more ecosystem partners that come together, including the customer, who's obviously the real estate company, the employees doing their part, the technology innovation companies, I think that is going to solve a big part of being able to handle the challenge today, but also definitely in the future.
Yeah.
Really good points, Dinesh. What are your thoughts on whatever we just mentioned? Do share on your side as well. Let's, you know, treat this, jump in whenever you guys want to. So we'll have a very interactive conversation this way also.
I think a lot of the things were already mentioned, but if going really hands-on, that like the best practices, how to get things moving and going on individual building level. I really fully agree what Dinesh said earlier about this journey mapping, and like, for example, if we think about the visitor flows in the building, it's really a key to understand the whole process. What are the touch points visitor faces when entering to the building, and like Alvin mentioned, this temperature measurement. So you can think that, okay, it's a simple thing, just start measuring, but you might eventually create a new congestion point, which is of course a risk for infections. So very practical examples on that you really need to map the big picture through this kind of journey mapping, and then look. Technology can solve some part of things, but then you might need to do also something else. Educate, of course, your users and help them to change the behavior. But then there can be also other things like changing the lobby layouts to better suit the new conditions and things like that. But it requires this kind of systematic, pragmatic approach, and based on that, you can then really find the best ways on leveraging also the technology. And about the ecosystems, fully agreeing with Dinesh and Alvin that nobody can do this alone, and that's also on Kone's side, we are the first company in our industry opening up our interfaces to our partners, and we want to be very active player in ecosystems, bringing what we can do and enabling that to be used in smart manner with partners and customers.
Okay.
I think also I just want to add, right, to the point Yuka, and also that was mentioned by Alvin, is we have to think of where is the industry going to, right? So, I mean, we discussed with so many people that, okay, how is flexible working going to happen, you know, etc. But think of a world where, you know, I decide when I want to come to work, but every time I want to decide I want to come to work, I need to think about, will I have access into the building? So is access going to be granted? See, today everybody has access to a building, but it's expensive. I mean, you have to onboard one person into a workspace requires a seat, a parking slot. It requires a token for you to enter and exit. It requires you to cater to F&B facilities. It's expensive, right? And so as the world moves towards a hybrid dynamic model where people are not always present in office, they come to a purpose. I think the next stage of the conversation has to be about what is the impact going to be on buildings and the facilities and the space and the air quality and the occupancy monitoring. Because honestly, it cannot be the same, right? If the whole world has changed and the nature of work and the purpose is going to change, buildings can't be the same. I think that's where, you know, again, that's the next phase of innovation, which needs to be thought about in terms of how that is going to happen. I can tell you that today, there are a lot of countries around the world that maybe went through the pandemic earlier and already kind of coming back, who are already innovating very, very quickly. And Alvin, it's great that you all have set up the innovation center and you're launching it next week. But these are the things that have to be trialed out. Otherwise, you become like a dinosaur, right? And then the whole world moves on, and then you're sitting there with, the same old way. It's not going to work out in the future, quite frankly. Yeah.
Definitely, Dinesh. I agree. Yuka, thanks for your we are actually we are at 4:40 mark, so we're nearing about 5 more minutes left. I kind of wanted to round up everything and lead this into the last question before we go into Q&A and open the floor. So the last question, the three of you mentioned a lot about the moving into work from home and also how that has to be in sync with the current situation that we're in. So work from home is very important because you need to make sure that there is also enough communication with those who are working from home and ensure that it's in sync and it's in proper in proper collaboration, in proper communication, and effectiveness is very important. So what do you three think on the wider industry landscape? You also mentioned on air quality in buildings and all those things, but what do you think how the future trends hold like for the commercial real estate industry? What kind of changes would you see? How exactly do you see the sync with those working from home and working in the office? So maybe I'll direct this question to Elwin first. How exactly do you see the landscape changing? Number one, how exactly do you see communication being very important, being very vital? What sort of practices that can be implemented, and basically impacts on changes that you've seen in future?
I think the change is going to be an evolution, company by company, and also activities by activities. I don't see one size fit all change happening across all industries, and it depends on the nature of work. I say that because, let's say in my industries, the kind of innovation we are looking at and how work from home, working at office, and so on will change differs according to the activities that we're doing. So for example, my project management guys, we develop projects. Today, it requires them to be on site to do inspection. So now we are actually having to look at technologies where they will allow us to do remote site inspection, site monitoring, and so on, right? So there's one category of projects that's out there that we have to look at. For those in the office, there is a CBD officers where by nature of activities, many companies cannot afford to have many people working from home. They still need people to come together because they provide shared services functions and so on that requires access to systems in the office and so on. We will have to find different ways to enable them to do it. Those in the business parks where they can afford to be a lot less office dependent, then how do we manage that process as well? So we have to manage whole host of different usage, to enable our customers to execute their strategies of working from home, working in office, working from anywhere, kind of things, right? But I also like to take this opportunity to say that while COVID is a key milestones for us to look at these technologies, we are also not losing sight of the longer term needs to address the sustainability issues. So just now, Dinesh talked about designing buildings differently. Yes, you're right. Today, we have to start collecting data on how to right size our M&E equipments, and how do we create spaces for people to come together and so on. But we have to start collecting the data now, to be able to guide us on how buildings of the future can be made differently, right? So in this lab, I also have companies here experimenting with laying fiber networks as a critical trunk to the buildings, and the ability to provision those bandwidth. How do you do it? How do you lay out the fiber in a multi tenant space and so on? It's something that we also experiment to see how do we best achieve that desired effect. And so we are looking at addressing the COVID-19 issues from a technology perspective. We also have to look beyond this, to see how, because buildings takes years to develop, design, and you cannot just say, I want a new building and you can actually get it done. Or a building that is built already, it's very difficult to retrofit it to fit the needs of the future. So we have to think through this very carefully.
Thank you, Owen.
Yeah.
Owen, a lot of insights on the use of data, a lot on basically thinking on a longer term situation and how exactly innovation is very important. Yuka, I'd like to hear your thoughts as kind of a closing statement on what you think the future trends are going to be like, what kind of changes are going to happen, more towards the building entry systems, more towards the controls. How exactly do you think that will shift post-pandemic and also with years to come?
Well, I think okay, let's use this building access and solutions are out there. It's just like one area of solutions in the building, but overall I see that there will be increasingly the digital layer on top of the physical building that is the key, because like we have seen with the COVID, there is need for buildings to adapt and change according to the needs, and without proper digital layer, including the services and allowing different parties to exchange the information between the systems and all that. Without that, it's really difficult to adapt to the changing conditions and build this kind of future proofness of the buildings. So I really see that the ecosystems and this digital layer being the big thing for the future, and there, of course, it opens up then totally new arenas for innovation as well, because when you have more open environments, it typically fosters the new innovation also more rapidly. And then, of course, like both Alvin and Dinesh have been mentioning, the ways of working, it's changing, and offices need to be adapting to these changing needs. And so it's, in a sense, very interesting times we are having regarding the future, and like big transition happening. Real estate industry and buildings hasn't necessarily been the forefront of the digitalization, but now I think thanks to COVID we are accelerating, and a lot of new opportunities are there to come.
Thank you, Yuka. Very good points. Dinesh, your thoughts on the future landscape? I would, kind of craft my question a little bit differently to you. Elwin gave a few things about data. How do you think data would help, in the proper sync of people who are working from home and people who are working in the office? How do you think we can leverage on these findings and these insights? What exactly we will get to see? And also, what do you think lies ahead of us?
So, every day when I get up in the morning, then I read the newspaper, and you scan the papers around the world. Somebody talks about autonomous buildings, healthy buildings, and somebody talks about different things. You meet different customers, right? So we were also thinking and planning, okay, so from our standpoint, what do we see this one common theme that people will start, that they're looking at right now, but it'll accelerate, if anything, as time goes by, as we get closer to vaccine, post-vaccine, and moving on, right? Sort of all the things. I think the one thing that I think that'll stay is the shift to the dynamic workplace. And why I call it the dynamic workplace, right? Because it's the same people it's the same companies, it's the same needs that people had in the past, and it's the same habits, right? However, it is the change in the workplace that has to happen. The workplace itself has to become very dynamic to be able to cater to that. And, that has to be data driven. Today in the world of AI, and you talked about AI, right? AI has to be the one that has to work with the technologies in the building to adapt the building on almost an hourly basis, right? Depending on, how many people are coming in, what kind of tenants you have, what is the lease arrangements you have with your tenants. So for example, you may have long-term leases versus you may say that, okay, for these 10 floors, it's a long-term lease, but for these 3 floors, it's a dynamic workplace. Anybody comes in and sits down and works, and then you bill them and you charge them. And I think data is going to play a huge role in it. To enable the dynamic workplace, I think is going to be one of the biggest challenges to the industry. There is no, and I agree with the point Alvin made earlier, right? I don't think anybody knows exactly, and I don't think people are going to be in a tearing hurry to run in that direction. But to crystal ball it out, that's what we are betting on. And I think, as I see companies, and I also know real estate companies that have already said, we're going to move. So they are moving hard and fast in that direction because they are very clear they want to be ahead of the curve. So time will tell. But out of all the things, I would say basically that's the one.
Very good. Very good insights from the three of you. Thanks so much for actually taking time to answer the questions. We would now leave this open to the floor and kind of ask if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A section or even in the chat function at the bottom. But we have a few questions already. So there is one that came in basically asking about the long-term benefit of this technology post-pandemic for the business and people, which we already touched on. We mentioned, it's very important also to build trust. Dinesh mentioned it's very important to build trust in the short term, in the long term, move to a flexible workplace. And also we asked for thoughts on the future trends and the landscape. So this has been touched on. I would move to the next question, which is, what, in your opinion, will be the new unseen needs that will arise from the buildings of tomorrow? So this would be more on, a little bit elaboration on the air quality and all those features. What exactly do you three think would constitute as the building of tomorrow? How exactly will sustenance be? A little bit of insights on that. Anyone can feel free to answer this question. So I'll just leave this open to the three of you.
Okay, maybe I can say a few short thoughts around that. May I see at least one new trend will be that we move more and more to this kind of hybrid buildings. So not necessarily anymore that much that one building is just offices and nothing else, but it will be more this kind of hybrid buildings, meaning that also there is more different kind of usages for that building, different times of the day and different parts of the building, and that of course then requires from the space, from the access management, and from the all these kind of topics a little bit further intelligence, and there I think AI and analytics is increasingly needed to be able to make the buildings well functioning also in this kind of setup.
Okay, great answer, Yuka. Does anyone, Elwin or Dinesh, do you guys want to add on to that?
Maybe Alvin, would be great to get your perspective on the unseen needs that will arise from the buildings of tomorrow, right?
Elwin.
I think Dinesh, building on the answer you gave to the last questions, on flexible space, we do think that that will evolve, going beyond just a co-working space environment. Landlords like us may have to provide more as a standard feature, a fully kitted out flexible space with a centralized app to book even rooms in your own space. So we do out the IT infrastructures, we do out the design of the buildings, and lease it to the companies, on a flexible basis, right? So that could be one way, the hybrid breeding model that Yuka talked about is very successfully implemented in Funan, as you can see, one of our newest building, where we turn old shopping or electronic shopping mall into a mixed development of mall, of offices, of service apartment, and so on. And that model has served us well because they feed off each other in terms of the customer base for the retail, especially F&B. If you have an office tenant there who needs to go and eat somewhere rather than have to leave the buildings to go somewhere else, that's the other things that we are looking at. If you look at Funan, one of the floors also has an outdoor garden. So we are also looking at integrating rooftop gardens to some of our buildings as an experiment to see how it feels like, to integrate all the different functions together and to make it fun for people to go to work, not just to go to work, but at the break they can go and do some gardening, grow their own plots of vegetables and so on that they can bring home to cook and so on. So I think those are some of the things that we are trying to make office of the future a bit more fun, a bit more flexible. But I would say that the journey is just starting, and this is where we really have to co-create with our customers. Hopefully, they don't just look at renting space and complain about the high rentals. We want to see, if we can make it a lot more efficient and more value enabling for them.
Maybe building a little bit on top of what Alvin you said, I think the thing that you mentioned, that making it more fun.
Yeah.
I think that's very important because let's face it, people will be working after the COVID more home than they did before. So what is the reasoning for them to come to the offices? Yeah. And eventually there will be always people who work from home. Some of them are in office. Yeah. So how you foster the collaboration and the cultural aspect within the organizations in this kind of setup. So most likely we need to have better this kind of digital collaboration tools, enabling better collaboration in this kind of hybrid setup where part of the team is in the office, part of the team work from home, and things like that.
Sounds good. Thank you both, Yuka and Elwin. There is also a question that came in. They said, someone said, work from home will have an impact on urban planning. Going by available data, if work from home is going to be here for long, would the money required for existing buildings to adopt innovative solution for post-pandemic situations justify the rental return to the real estate players?
Let me try to answer that. Our take on that is technology, if we pick the right ones and we know how to implement it well, can actually may not need to cost more, right? Just give you an example. One of the things that we are trying to experiment with also is today, as more and more IoT devices get implanted into the buildings, the cost of wiring up the whole buildings, connecting them to the BMS systems and so on, becomes pretty expensive. But with the advent of 5G, that may change. So one of the challenge statements we have put out to the industry is there somebody game enough to build a wireless BMS systems together with us, where the IoT devices and the central BMS systems will communicate through the 5G network, and that will reduce quite a lot of implementation costs and will give us a lot of flexibilities to put in new technologies in future, right? So I think we have to look at it totally from a different frame, different perspective, rather than looking at adding on, building on existing infrastructures, existing technologies, and that could help you change the cost dynamics. The other perspective also is that we may also have to develop a business model where we have a differentiated level of services, so some people may want to pay more for better services in the building. Some people may not want to pay more. And then how do you create the differentiated technology offerings in order to manage the costs and so on. Will work from home impact urban planning? Definitely it will. Singapore, luckily, for us, the foresight of our master planners, you will start to see that we no longer just have a region zone for office, region zone for residential. Even down at our Shenton Way and so on, you start to see that we already have residential buildings interspersed amongst the commercial buildings and so on. So I think it creates a lot more vibrancy. It allows a better usage of space and also address the needs for people who may want to work closer to the office, to live closer to the office, to have the possibilities of doing so. So the two questions actually are interrelated, if I may say that. You're right. Rental may fall, but focus on creating value, focus on using technologies to create new solutions, implement them, and you may see a very, very different outcome.
Thank you, Alvin. I hope that kind of answers the two questions on urban planning and also the new solutions. So Alvin touched on those points, but let's hear sort of closing statements and last thoughts from Yuka and also from Dinesh on the tech innovation side of things and on the importance of it, and we can call it a day.
No, thank you, Nat, for kind of moderating this. I think times have changed. We have to change with the times. But I think as an ecosystem, the commitment is to keep on innovating and making sure that we bring it together. But we do look forward to all the real estate community and the providers of technology really collaborating together to be able to, it's a challenge for everybody. We have to get together to solve it. I think that's what I would like to say at the ending statement, right? So Yuka, maybe thoughts from yours.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. This is like the thing that nobody can do alone. It's about ecosystems. It's about being open and doing things together. A lot of opportunities out there, and I think the companies who will be able to work smoothly together with partners and be open, they have the most prominent future to also be there in the leading position for the future.
Okay, sounds great. I feel like this was a very interactive, was a very educational webinar, and I hope everyone has their questions answered. But if they don't, feel free to just visit any of the websites, CapitaLand, Smart Spaces, and also Kone. Feel free to contact any of the consultants there. We'll be more than happy to help and also answer any burning questions. We would be sending an emailer right after this webinar, so you guys would get a chance to see how exactly the agenda is like and the flow. Listen to a little bit of the insights and input from Elwin, Dinesh, and Yuka. And if there is any further burning questions, feel free to just reply to the email as well, or reach out to the consultants accordingly. And I just want to say a very warm thank you to all attendees. We've got attendees from all over Asia. So we've got some from Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore. We see a very diverse attendee list today. So thanks all for coming. And thank you to the three panelists for all your valuable inputs. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much and have a great day ahead.
Nat, let me just give a couple of minutes. I promise to share. I mean, since the audience has called in, I just want to give you a glimpse of the lab.
Oh, yes.
Unfortunately, it's all digital, so you don't see nice equipment anywhere, but you can see a lot of screens. And these are all taken from data across our science park or our buildings and so on, stream here, process here, AI and so on. And they're all working on different parts of the technology. Even on the ceiling, you see the circular light. Yeah. These are the first of its kind in Asia, light imported from Denmark. These are full light spectrum LED lights that can adapt to different moods that you want it to be, and they are supposed to be great for people working indoors, because especially why it's done in the Nordic countries, Denmark and so on, is because you don't see a lot of sunlight, but it simulates the effect of sunlight in the indoor environment, right? So those are things that we are playing around with. So every 6 months, 9 months, we will exit and bring in a batch of new technologies to evaluate, to play with, and see what can eventually be incorporated into our products in future.
That's amazing, Elvin.
Yeah, yeah.
Walk through. This is
Yeah.
really great. Thanks so much for sharing. And those
Yeah.
slides, wonderful. Very innovative stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add on before I close this?
No, that's all. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for dialing in. And thanks to my fellow panelists. It's a great discussions.
Thanks, Alvin. Thanks, Yuka.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ned.
Thank
And,
you, Alvin. Thank you, Dinesh.
Yeah,
Thanks
look
so
forward
much.
to that. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.